Hey guys, it's Kimberly from the Fat Quarter Shop, and we have Amanda Herring here talking about her Friendship Quilt Along, and now she's going to show us the Trustworthy block that has paper piecing. So let's get started.
All right, let's make the Trustworthy block. This block is made using foundation paper piecing, which is my most favorite way to piece a quilt. Here's what your finished block will look like, and I'm going to walk you through the steps of how to make this. The first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need to print out the templates. Make sure when you print them out that your 1-inch square is measuring properly. If this is off, it will throw off the size of your finished block. So this is really important to make sure you have that done right. What we're going to do first is take one of our templates and we're just going to trim some off. And I am not I don't use my ruler to do this. It doesn't need to be perfectly straight. I just want to eliminate some of this paper so that I have a little bit less to deal with. Now, the next thing that I do to prepare my papers is I'm going to fold on every line that I'm going to sew through. So these diagonal lines here all need to be folded. And I like to fold each line twice. I like to really make sure I get a good crease one way and then flip it back the other way. And the reason I like to be really careful about this is because in the end, after I've sewn through this is weakening that paper just a little bit more so that it tears away a little bit easier and puts less strain on your seam. You're going to want to complete this process for both templates. You'll print out 2 templates for this that will be sewn together at the end. So complete this process for both of those. The next thing you're going to need is a glue stick. We're going to be working mostly from the back side, but what I'm going to show you first is where we're going to start. As you'll notice, each of these is labeled with a number and a letter. We have A1 through A5. On your other template, they're labeled with B's. We're going to be working starting with A1. We're going to turn this to the back side. We're going to put a little bit of glue on the paper, and we're going to put down our first piece of fabric. Now, we're going to fold back our paper to show that that's where our first seam would be. So that is on the A1 line. We're going to fold that back, and we're going to use our rotary cutter and ruler to trim this to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right. So now we have one piece of fabric on our A1 and we're going to move to our A2. This is where your sewing begins. Lining up your second piece of fabric with your first piece of fabric, we know right where that needs to go because we have that seam allowance. You're going to lay that down and you're going to put some pins in it, and then you're going to take this to your machine and you're going to sew right down the A1 line. When setting up your machine to sew this seam, you're going to want to reduce your stitch length. I like to set mine just a little bit below a 1.5. That makes it easier for your paper to tear away in the end. I also like to do a little bit of a back stitch at each end because sometimes when you're tearing away the paper, the ends of those seams can be a little bit delicate. I've done the first piece, sewn the second piece, and this actually shows the third piece, but I'm going to show you what we're going to do. After you finish sewing like this, we know we're ready for the next piece. So just like we did on the first piece, we're going to turn it over, fold our paper back, and trim the seam allowance down to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now you can see that we're ready for the next piece. So we just continue on in the same way through all of these pieces. We line up this next block, pin, take it to your sewing machine and sew through this seam. And then you'll fold back, trim, place the next piece, put it on, and sew it in place as well. We have completed all of A and all of B. These are all ready to be trimmed and sewn together. So we're going to do that step next. When you trim down your blocks, you'll notice you have an outline here and you have an outline here. This line indicates the line that will represent our finished block size once it's sewn into the quilt. This line is our trim line, and that's the line we want to cut on right now. I love this because it's paper piecing, foundation paper piecing, tells you exactly where to sew and where to cut, and it's a great way to get a precise result, even if you're not a precise piecer. It's kind of like sewing with a coloring book. All right, so I'm going to move on to my second set of templates. Now, I just want to point out we have a little tiny corner here that's notched for your ease. I did not cut those, so I'm just going to go back and give those a little cut. That just makes the blocks sew together just a little teeny bit better. So here we have our parts B and our parts A. These are ready to just be laid together, matching up your seam allowance and sewing them together. Piece of cake. This is so simple. Once they're sewn together, you'll end up with a piece that looks like this. This block is perfectly measured and ready to go. The only thing left is to tear off all of these papers off the back. So to tear off your papers, I like to go back in and fold once again. And then very carefully remove your paper. To pull off the next paper, just by giving a slight tug on the seam, you're going to free that edge. And you're going to continue on in the same way until you've removed all of your papers. This paper is just the regular paper that I keep in my printer. It's not anything special. Just what you normally have, just a normal laser printer or inkjet printer paper. Make sure to check out all of the other Friendship Quilt Along videos that I have here with Fat Quarter Shop. Be sure to buy your quilt kit and follow along with the Quilt Along.